Welcome to the Cultivation Cast by Black Dog LED with Kevin and Noah. In this podcast series, we will cover all things related to indoor cannabis cultivation. So today we're going to talk about our complete LED grow kits on the Black Dog LED site. We get a lot of questions about them, we get a lot of interest in them, and we really want to explain why the parts are in there and heck, why we even have grow kits as an LED grow light company. So let's back up and say, why do we even have these grow kits? You know, we do focus on LED grow lights. That is our primary focus at Black Dog LED, but we like to help our customers. And what we had over the years was a lot of customers are beginners that are moving to LED. A lot of the people that are first-time growers, they don't want the heat. They don't want the danger of having an HID bulb in their house, so they go to LED. Now, if you're a brand new grower and you come to us and you buy a light, then you say, great, I have a light. What else do I need to grow indoors? And the answer to that used to be, okay, do you have 2 hours and we'll explain everything to you? And so what we realized is a lot of the new people that are growing with our LED grow lights is they really are beginners and they need as much help as they can, both in terms of equipment and setting it up and, of course, plant maintenance and plant care. So, you know, we've been growing indoors for many, many years amongst us. And so what we figured we would do is put together what we felt was a true comprehensive, complete grow kit. Our preference would have been to go out on the market and just say, hey, go buy this kit from someone else. And we looked out there in the market and nobody offers what we consider to be a true grow kit. And the goal of the grow kit to us should be you can get that grow kit delivered to your house and you should be able to go all the way through to harvest and have something when you're finished. And so we tried to include everything, except we did draw the line at we call consumables. So we don't sell nutrients. You're going to need those forever. You need to find a source for those. We don't sell the growing medium because different people want different things, whether you're soil, hydro, whether you're rock wool or cocoa or whatever. So we don't include the grow medium. And of course, thanks to federal laws, we don't include any plants or seeds in our kits. But everything else, from beginning all the way through to harvest and curing your flower, we have included everything you need for that.
And one of the trickiest things, actually, as a new grower is knowing everything that you will actually need for your grow, as well as all of those other things you see in the local stores, which aren't actually required to have a successful grow. So our kit contains all of the minimal stuff required to have a good grow, in our experience, having a lot of grows ourselves. But it does not include stuff that is not actually necessary for a good, successful grow.
I think, as Kevin will tell you, our longest standing indoor grower, he's got over, 30 years under his belt of indoor gardening. He can tell you how many late night or last minute trips you have to make to Home Depot or to the hydro shop to get that. Oh, I don't have this and I didn't know I needed that sort of thing.
Yeah, and after a while, if you've been growing for decades, you end up with a closet or a room or an entire basement, in my case, dedicated to spare parts and media. And I mean, I practically could run a hydroponic store out of my basement for a bit. And if you're just a new grower, that's not easy to come by. And a lot of these things that we include in our kit are not exactly obvious that you would need them. And yet it really makes a huge difference in terms of your likelihood of running a successful grow.
Yeah, certainly. I'll vouch. Any long-term gardener I've been in their basement, Kevin definitely falls in that category. They have a plethora of gardening gear they've built up over time that they've either realized doesn't work or they've moved on to new gear or they just have backups. It is amazing the kind of yard sale you can find in some of these growers' basements. So that's why we went ahead and designed what we call the complete LED grow kits. What we really wanted was something that there's minimal choices, and we'll go over those choices in a moment and why the gear is in there, but we wanted it to make it simple. You kind of know you buy the right size tent for your space and for the yields you want to get, and you buy the kit and you're off to the races. Again, you just need to acquire the nutrients, the soil or growing medium, and then also a plant or a clone or a seed or something along those lines. But let's dive right into what we have for our kit offerings. So at the highest level, when you first go to the complete grow kit page on our site, you're going to see that we have a number of sizes. So your first thing you have to determine is, What size tent do you want? A lot of it's going to be dictated to begin with by the size of your space. If you've got a little space you're trying to stick a tent in, you can't go buy a 4x4 tent and put it in a 3x3 space. So the physical dimensions and a lot of those things are going to be kind of the first in line. You're going to look at where you're going to put your garden. And Kevin can speak a little bit about how you're going to select the right location in your house, because that is part of growing with the kid, is where you put it is going to affect your chances of success. And then from there, we'll go into what you select after the tent. But Kevin, why don't you speak a little bit about why you'd want to place your tent different places in your house?
Yeah, so the tent is required as a way of helping to contain your grow, to keep the temperature and humidity inside the tent as close to ideal for growing plants as possible, as well as blocking out all the light so you can give them the required 12 hours of darkness to get the plants into flower. Don't want to expose them to any incidental or stray light during that dark period, or it'll cause problems with the flowering cycle. So the tent is really good at helping to contain the grow environment and keep light leaks out. However, the placement of the tent in your house is also critical. You want to put it someplace where you actually have fairly decent control over the temperature of the room the tent is in. For example, if you put it in a garage, which over the winter time is getting down to freezing, it's going to become very challenging to keep the temperature in the tent appropriate. Same thing over the summertime. If your garage is not air conditioned and it's getting up to 120 degrees in your garage, chances are, no matter what you do, you're not going to have a successful grow in a tent in that sort of environment. So putting the tent someplace where it has a relatively even, consistent temperature as much as possible is going to ensure the best chance of success. Probably someplace like a basement or other similar area which might not be used as much but is consistently cool, not cold but cool, is probably the ideal place to put your tent. One thing you don't want to do is put it in a high traffic area or an area that, for example, is right next to a main entry door, because a lot of drafts can cause problems with the temperature there as well.
So once you've determined, based on what Kevin explained, where you want to put the tent and you measure it out, then, as I said, your first choice that you need to make when looking at our kits is the size tent you want. Now, we offer a variety of sizes. Again, the only difference is how much yield you're going to get, the size of light you're going to put in there, and how much space you need to set it up. It's not that one is better than the other. They're all the same quality. It's really a question of finding the right tent for what you're trying to accomplish in the space you have. So the smallest tents we have are in the 2x2 range, 2 feet by 2 feet. That's going to give you about 4 square feet. And then we range up to about a 5x5 and kind of 5.5 by 5.5 in that range, which is a rather large garden, actually, because now you're up over 25 into the 30 square foot range for your garden, your canopy, which is a real production space. So we're going to take an example here, and we're going to use, for this discussion, we're going to use the 3x3 kit just as kind of a starting point. But once you've selected your tent, the first choice you need to make when you land on that page is now the light. And that does require a bit of thought, and that's going to change the price of your kit significantly. So again, like the tents, there is no light that's better than the other in terms our lights are all the same quality from the 200 up to the 1000. They're all going to put out the same good spectrum. They're going to turn out the same quality flower. What you're looking at is obviously different in the cost up front, a different in the energy to run your grow, and then, of course, the big reward, the difference in the yield you're going to get at the end of the day. So all of our tents have some choices with them in terms of what light you're going to go with. We start with the smallest one and go up to the biggest, and these are our recommendations for what we would put in our own garden. So for example, for the 3x3, we don't offer the 200 as a option because we know it won't flower that entire space. It could veg most of it, but it's really not going to flower it, so we don't offer it as an option in there. Also, we don't offer in that kit the 1000. Could you put it in there? Yeah, an advanced grower could, but that's a more advanced setup and something that requires more skill. So what you really want to do is pick the light. Again, we have choices, and what we find the best thing is to determine what are you looking to get out of the garden. So Kevin can speak a little bit to our different lights over a lot of grows ourselves and our customers and lots of feedback from them. We can kind of tell you what you would get out of these tents with the different lights, assuming three simple things. You are a decent grower and have decent growing skills. You have decent genetics, meaning your genetics are going to produce based on their makeup, and that they're predetermined they're going to have a good yield, because there are genetics out there that are low yielders and you're never going to do well with those. But again, you might want to grow them for quality reasons. But again, so good genetics, a good grower, and a good environment. So if you maintain your environment, you're a good grower, and you have good genetics, you can expect the kind of following yields from your lights.
So, yeah, we will basically say that you should be able to get at least half a pound from our Phytomax 2 200 light, 1 pound from our Phytomax 2 400 light, 1.5 pounds from our 600 model, 2 pounds from our 800 model, and at least 2.5 pounds from our Phytomax 2 1000. Now, we give these numbers, again, with all the caveats Noah gave earlier of decent genetics, decent grower, and decent environment. But we have run grows ourselves with less than ideal environmental conditions because the rooms weren't set up properly yet. And we still get consistently above these yields that we're quoting. So these are low numbers. They're conservative numbers. Typically, for example, with 1,000, we usually end up harvesting well over 3 pounds with that, with decent genetics. So conservative numbers, but in the 3.5 by 3.5 tent kit, for example, you've got the option of the 400, the 600, or the 800. Noah also already pointed out that we don't even offer the 1000 in there. Not that it's not possible to use that in there, but realistically, to make use of that much light and not hurt the plants at the same time, you would need to supplement CO2 in that area and not just do it with some sort of bag that slowly gives off CO2 that you can buy at your local hydroponic store. You'd have to do it with a burner or a tank of some sort, basically a setup that is unrealistic to have for a 3.5 by 3.5 foot tent, which is why we just don't even offer that light as an option. So we only offer options that set you up for success. And basically out of the 3.5 by 3.5 foot tent with the 400 light, you could expect at least a pound out of there. And it's going to be a pretty easy grow just because you don't have that much light intensity compared to the other options. So your plants are going to be a little bit more spread out and they're not going to be packed in as much as if you went with the 600 watt light. You're going to get 1.5 pounds out of that. It's going to be a little bit more work on the grow simply because more light equals more plant matter. It's going to get denser in there, and you're going to see more flower per square foot inside that tent. Now, if you go all the way up to the 800 watt light, we get guaranteed at least 2 pounds out of there, and it's going to be the most work out of that small tent. Again, not an unreasonable amount of work, but simply because you've got more going on, more plants growing in there, more plant material growing in there per square foot or per cubic foot, it's going to be a little bit more work, but gets you the highest yield out of that small 12 square foot area.
Thanks. So when we get to the light selection in the tent, you'll notice that we've kind of grouped the different parts in the kits as different sections. So, for example, the first one's the light, then we have grow containment. The light we've already talked about. The tent is already pre-selected because you did your measurements, you kind of figured out where you're going to put it, and you've picked your tent. So the next thing below that is our slide Scrog Kit. And that's something we created because, again, we couldn't find it on the market. And as gardeners ourselves, we know how important it is to have a good Scrog system that works and is easy to apply and use over and over. So we created a kit that basically gets put onto the tent. It's attached to the poles of the tent itself, and it slides up and down on those poles. It's unique to us. You could even build it on your own. We have special materials we're using that are UV stabilized and things like that. But definitely the Scrog Kit makes your grow a lot easier to manage and maintain. As Kevin was talking about, when you get into the higher lights, especially where you have a lot of growth in there, it really does help to give those plants the support, and scrogging is critical. A lot of people have a belief that by stabilizing the plants and giving them support, they're going to feel that support and they're going to put more energy towards the flowers instead of strengthening their stems because you're giving them the kind of artificial strength in their stems with your Scrog. So there's a lot of good reasons. It spreads out your grow, allows for better airflow, better light penetration, and potentially larger yields along with that.
And it keeps dirt out of your flowers.
And so that's the grow containment. So as I said, we're compartmentalized in our kits. If you look into different groups, the next one is ventilation and air circulation. So we'll run through that, but keep in mind, all of these on our complete grow kits, there's no way to edit them. They come with it. It is the kit. With the kit, if you take all this stuff, you do get a discount. So they're not editable. You can pick the light after you've picked your tent. And then there's only one other spot, which we'll cover further on in this, where you can make an adjustment based on the yields you're going to need to cure, and we'll cover that when we get there. But most of this is set in stone for our complete kits. If you don't need the full kit or you want to edit it, you can go over to our Build Your Own Kit page, and there you can configure the kit to have anything you want or don't want in it and get it into your cart nice and easily. So let's start with the ventilation and air circulation right now, which is going to cover anything, whether you're moving air in and out of the tent or moving air around inside the tent. One of the biggest challenges we had, again, we couldn't find it on the market, was an oscillating fan. You really want an oscillating fan in your small grow space, and we wanted something that could attach to the tent. So what we've got is our first item in the ventilation and air circulation is an oscillating fan that will attach to the tent pole. Following that, the next thing you need to worry about is getting air in and out of your tent.
So, and this is one area where a lot of the other so-called kits or complete kits on the market are really skimping on things. We've found over the years that more air movement inside the tent with the oscillating fans is critical, and having an oscillating fan instead of a fixed non-oscillating fan makes a huge difference. With the ducting fans for helping to control the odor as well as the ventilation for humidity and temperature in your tent, it's another big thing. Most of the kits on the market might include a single ventilation fan, which means that then you're supposed to put your carbon filter for odor control on that, which means your carbon filter is actually only getting used when you're trying to pull air out of your tent because it's too warm. And because the air in the tent is only going through the carbon filter once, it's still exhausting into your room, smelling quite strongly. Maybe only half as much as it does inside the tent, but still, it smells quite a bit. We found that by far the best way to maintain odor control as well as a clean growing environment is to have a carbon filter running inside the tent 24/7. So we include not just one, but two duct fans with every kit. One is designed to go and get connected directly to the carbon filter and just scrub the air inside the tent, dumping it right back into the tent. But by scrubbing the air of odor in the tent all the time, we're also getting rid of not just odors, but also bacteria and fungal spores, which can cause problems with your grow. It means that when you do open up your tent or when the other fan needs to kick on to mitigate temperature or humidity in the tent, all of the air that's being exhausted out has been scrubbed so many times it has virtually no odor whatsoever. So it's a much better way of setting things up. It is not the standard way that is encouraged by a lot of other tent kit options on the market, but it works far, far better, and it's always what we recommend. So it's what we default to with the complete kits. So as part of the ventilation and air circulation, we also have an appropriately sized carbon filter. Now, the inline duct fan and the carbon filter, we automatically will size according to the size tent you want. So you don't need the 6-inch carbon filter and the 6-inch ducting fan for our cute little 2x2 foot tent. In fact, it'd be a challenge just to fit the 6-inch carbon filter inside the 2x2 foot tent. So that's where we will automatically have the kits include the right size gear and even the right quantity of certain items for you. So besides the carbon filter, we'll also include a fresh air intake filter, which is basically just designed when the tent actually needs to have air pulled out of it to get rid of excess temperature or humidity. The air has to come in somewhere, and you don't want to suck in a whole bunch of dust or pollen or bacteria or fungi into your grow. So we include an appropriate air intake filter, which helps prevent all of that stuff from being sucked into your garden.
And then to tie that intake filter and your carbon filter and the two intake fans that Kevin was talking about before, we do provide you the ducting that you need. It'll come with 25 feet of ducting, which is plenty to cut into pieces and get everything you need done, as well as the aluminum duct tape, which we have found over the years to be the best type of tape for connecting your air ducting to the different filters and fans.
Yeah, and just using whatever random kind of tape you have sitting around the house may look like it's going to work, but trust me, after many decades of experience, I've even gone down to the point of actually doing tests of various different brands of aluminum tape to see which lasts the longest and which sticks the longest, because there actually is a difference, and most tape that you can get for packaging or other things just does not hold up in a grow environment for very long at all.
Yeah, as a lot of things don't hold up in an abusive grow environment, as we know. So that wraps up the the air handling and air circulation of your garden. So the next section we're going to cover on the complete kits is the monitoring and control. So in the monitoring and control, what we're looking at here is when you have a garden, you need to, one, keep track of what's going on in there, and you need to spend time dialing it in. Every new garden takes a one grow cycle or at least a week or two to get it locked in. So this section is going to cover the things that you use to both monitor it and see what's going on in there, and then also the things you use to make those changes, such as changes to temperature and humidity, and even controlling the light cycle of your light, whether it's for veg or flower. So starting at the top, we have our grow glasses. This is unique to us in that we work with Method 7, who many of you have heard of. They do glasses for all types of lighting in horticultural indoor grow environments, whether you're under HPS, metal halide, or LEDs. They make glasses. They do make a custom pair of glasses for us that takes our spectrum, reverses it out to white, and makes it as if you're working in a nice white kind of T5 environment. You're under some CFLs basically, and it makes it nice. It makes it easier to diagnose your plants, see if you've got disease or pests, see if you have any nutrient deficiencies, because you're actually seeing the plants in there as if they're under white light. Because again, our lights are designed for plants. We don't care about the human eye response. We focus on the plants, and therefore our spectrum is not ideal necessarily for human eyes, although it is ideal and perfect for the plants.
Although it does appear more or less white to the human eye. And you don't need the glasses to be able to see what's going on in your grow. It's usually very obvious with the spectrum we're using. Everything is pretty easy to see, but the light is still extremely bright. We do have ultraviolet in our spectrum, so the glasses protect your eyes from that. And for me personally, the most important aspect of the glasses is that while our spectrum appears more or less white to the human eye, if you try and take a picture of your plants, the cameras always see it as very purple. So being able to take a picture through the glasses for full color correction is actually what I think the glasses are most useful for. So as we continue on down in the monitoring and control section, one of the most important things in there next is a light timer, just to turn your lights on and off at the appropriate time of day. I've spoken with many new growers that are convinced that they can get away without a timer. They'll remember to turn the light on at the appropriate time and remember to turn it off. And that works great until the first time you forget, and then you've screwed everything up. So timers are really inexpensive, really very practical items, and very important for getting your lights to turn on and off at the right time of day. Almost equally important is the temperature and humidity controller that we include. A lot of the other kits available on the market don't include any sort of temperature controller at all. They just expect you to, I guess, manually plug in the fan and unplug it or turn it on and off as needed to control temperature in your tent. But that is not only impractical, it doesn't work very well. You can't be around 24/7 to monitor your tent. So a lot of the options that are available do actually have some sort of temperature controller, but it's temperature only, meaning that if the temperature inside your growing tent gets up to a certain set point, say 85 degrees, then it'll kick on the fan and pull in fresh, clean air so that it'll hopefully cool down your tent. And that works well for temperature, but it does not control humidity at all. And any long-term grower is going to tell you that as the plants get larger, you have a lot more surface area on those leaves. They start actually putting off a lot of humidity into the growing environment. And especially as the plants get larger and a little bit more crowded towards the end of flower, maintaining a lower humidity level becomes critical, because if you're only changing things in the tent for temperature's sake, you're often going to end up with humidity levels that are entirely too high. And in crowded conditions, late in flower, when everything is starting to bulk up, it causes mold and mildew issues. And the last thing you want to do is have a successful grow that's ruined in the last week because it grew mold. So being able to control both temperature and humidity is critical. And as far as I know, we are the only company that offers a kit with a combined temperature and humidity controller.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, this is the only product we found. It's odd that there aren't any other products on the market that we can even locate that do allow you to control one fan for both temperature and humidity. And as Kevin was pointing out, nothing worse than doing a huge, beautiful grow over 2.5 months. You get to the end of your 10 weeks, you get your flower down and it's got bud rot in it. I mean, that's just the worst feeling in the world. So controlling your humidity is critical to not only getting quality, but getting anything usable out of it.
And then, of course, to be able to monitor the temperature and humidity, not just at the current situation, but also over time, we include a large digital high-growth thermometer with min-max functions that records the minimum and maximum temperature and humidity since you reset it last. So you can actually check on your plants and how they've been doing over the past 24 or 36 hours so that you can make any changes you need to the temperature and humidity controller to keep things in their ideal range. We also include a grow journal, which is specifically designed to allow you to take notes on your grows and track things, nutrients, feeding regimens, as well as harvest information and help you keep track of your grows. Because after you've done a few of these, they all start blurring together. It's nice being able to look back and remember exactly what you did on that grow 6 months ago that you liked so much compared to the last grow you did, for example.
Yeah, the grow journal is critical. A lot of people don't realize how much of a learning process growing indoors is, and every grow you do, you will learn something out of it. And by journaling it, it'll help you, one, expose those learning opportunities where you can learn something from your mistakes or from something you did right. But it also helps you keep track and, like Kevin said, be able to look back over the years, because I know plenty of growers that have these beautiful notebooks and it's just full of information. So it is worth your time to take the time to journal that as you're going through your grow. You will thank yourself later.
We also include a illuminated microscope, which is critical for being able to examine the leaves up close. If you start seeing weird patterning on the leaves, you need to be able to look at the leaves up close and figure out what's causing that. I mean, it could just be that their plants are showing a little bit of nutrient burn. It could be a little bit of mechanical damage from rubbing on things, or it could be insects. And you want to be able to look at the leaves up close to examine and see if you've got insect issues, for example, or see if you've got powdery mildew issues. It also helps quite a bit when you're examining trichomes later on as you're getting closer to the harvest time to be able to determine whether or not your crop is ripening up and what you need to do as far as harvesting for that. We also include a green LED headlamp because when the plants are in the middle of their dark cycle, it's imperative that you not interrupt that by giving them bright light during the middle of their dark cycle. And even dim light during the middle of their dark cycle can be a problem if it's the wrong spectrum. That's why we include the green LED headlamp. Now, if you're in a completely pitch black room with nothing but this green LED lamp on, you can actually open up your tent safely during the night cycle and not interrupt the plant's sleeping period because they are not sensitive to the wavelength of green light that this headlamp is putting out. So if you need to go in and access your grow, check on your grow, oftentimes, I mean, you come back from a vacation or even just an evening out and the lights have already turned off, but you know you need to water your plants. So this is a way that allows you to go ahead and do that during the dark cycle without interrupting your grow. And then finally, in the monitoring and control section, we have reusable plant tags because I know everyone thinks that they're going to remember exactly what plant is in what pot and what strain is what, but it starts blurring together after a few weeks. And by the time you're 3 or 4 grows in, you realize just how important it is to actually have everything labeled. These things are reusable, and you can just throw them in a little bit of bleach and clean them off and reuse them over and over and over again. And they allow you to keep track of not just strain names, but for example, you can keep track of cloning dates or dates when you flipped into flower, other things. Keep that information with the plant so that you have it with it.
Yeah, I can't say how many times I've heard growers, even professional growers, who are upset they lost a genetic because they didn't track it properly, didn't have things tagged up, and they flowered every bit of it they had, and now that genetic is lost to time. So if we get anything out of this entire podcast, I would say one thing is label your plants for sure. It's a big mistake to make. So that concludes the section of monitoring and control. We're going to move into the root zone section now. So we just call it that because it's often referred to as the root zone, kind of when you're talking about the area where your plants are absorbing their nutrients and uptaking water. And so this has to do with anything, whether it's pots or the saucers we use to contain the water coming out of the pots, or the risers. And Kevin will go into those as well. The goal here, and Kevin will talk about it, is we do provide a lot of kits, or a lot of people think you just throw a plant in a pot the size you want to finish it and you're good. And that's not the case. You actually want to step your plants up from the small sizes all the way to the large in nice increments to develop better roots.
And it is more work to do that way. It does require more equipment to do it that way. But there's a reason we recommend it, and it's because it works a lot better. So the first thing we include are pot elevators, which are basically just a plastic grid that's designed to hold the pot about 3 inches above the surface of the tray it's in. That allows you, when you're watering, if water's coming out the bottom of the pot, it means that the pot is not going to be sitting in that water. And if anyone's ever tried taking care of houseplants before and you overwater a little bit and you leave them sitting in that tray of water, that water actually goes rancid and goes bad pretty quickly. It's actually drowning the roots on the plants, and it can cause root rot and actually cause the death of the entire plant. So it's definitely not something that you want, having your plants sitting in water all the time in soil. So we include these pot elevators. It makes it much easier to not have your plants sitting in water. It gives them ideal drainage. They always have air circulating beneath the pots, and it makes for a much healthier plant overall. Also makes getting rid of excess water out of the saucers vastly easier than having a pot sitting in there as well. So we include deep pot saucers. These are not the cheap ones that you often see at the grocery store that just have a little tiny lip and they might hold a cup or two of water before they overflow. These actually have a significant 6-inch lip on the side. So these things can actually hold gallons of water. You can actually water your plants in the saucers with the elevators in there as well. But the elevators are designed to fit inside of our pot saucers. And that means that you can actually flush several gallons of water through the plants before it starts building up in the saucer to the point where it would actually start getting into the pot. Makes it a lot more convenient for normal watering. Normally, you can do all of your normal watering, have water coming out the bottom of the pots, and only deal with it at the very end when you're done with watering. Even during flush, at the end of flowering, when you're running many gallons of water through every pot, it makes the whole process a lot easier than having some small little tray that doesn't hold much water at all. So for the purposes of moving plants up through various different pot sizes, we actually include a collection of different pots, and which pots exactly get included depends on the size kit you have, because for example, while you might technically be able to fit 4 7-gallon pots in our 2.5 by 2.5 foot tent, that's not allowing any room for air circulation on the sides. And honestly, the size plants that should be in that size pot will not fit in a 2 by 2 foot tent. So we only include the pot sizes up to the maximum that we would actually recommend running in that size tent. Start with some 4-inch starter pots, which are ideal for germinating seeds or for your first transplant of clones that you might be getting. These pots typically will hold the plant and keep it happy for about 2 weeks before you actually need to put it in a larger pot. Now, why not just put it in a larger pot to begin with? There's actually several different reasons why. For example, if you're germinating a seed, one thing you want to do is keep the seed nice and evenly moist. You don't want it to be overly wet, and you don't want it to be overly dry. If it's in a very large pot, it's very tricky to keep it evenly moist. Oftentimes, an overly large pot will contain so much water that it will keep seeds overly wet, and then you end up rotting the seeds or freshly transplanted cutting out. And you need to be able to water new fruit. You need to be able to water new, fresh seedlings or cuttings not just once a week, not every other week. You want to be able to give them fresh nutrients and fresh water and cycle them between a dry-ish soil media and a wet soil media every few days. If you're just keeping them constantly moist in a very large pot, their roots don't actually have incentive to grow much, to search out for moisture and nutrients, and they don't grow as good a root system. In addition, plants have a tendency to just grow their roots out as wide as they possibly can fan, which means they'll send roots out that hit the edge of the pots, and then they just start circling the edge of the pots without actually filling up the interior volume of soil that they're in. So by moving them up between different pot sizes, you're actually forcing the plants to make use of all of the soil volume that they've got in one size pot before you give them slightly more soil volume in the next size pot. And you end up with a much better, much more dense root system overall when the plant is ready to go flipped into flower. So we'll include 4-inch pots, which are good for starting, 1-gallon pots, which are ideal for the next step up. And then depending on the size tent kit, we include a 2 or 3-gallon pot as the final step before a smart pot, a cloth pot, which is what we recommend for actually flowering the plants out. And again, depending on the size tent kit you get, that's either a 3, 5, or 7-gallon smart pot that we give you.
Right, and that wraps up the root zone. So that's everything you're going to need to contain. Again, as I said early on, we don't include the actual grow media, so you're going to need to get a soil or something like that, depending on what you want to grow in. It could be cocoa, is pretty popular these days. But either way, you're going to use those pots and size up as Kevin explained. So the next section we're going to cover after root zone is nutrient measuring, mixing, and application. That section is going to contain all the tools and things that you need to properly measure and administer the nutrients to your plants to feed them throughout the growth cycle, whether it's veg or flower. So most of this stuff is fairly simple. But one of the most expensive things in our entire kit is the pH meter that we provide with it. It's a Blue Lab combo meter, and there are cheaper meters out there, but we can tell you from a lot of experience that if you buy one of the pens or you buy a cheaper meter, it might work out of the box, but they just don't last. This is a good meter that you'll find even in universities, you'll find it in laboratories, and we've got some that are going on a couple of years at this point and they still work well. And if you do have a problem, unlike some other pH meters, it does have a replaceable probe, so you don't have to buy the whole thing over again. So our nutrient measuring, mixing, and application section starts with our Blue Lab combo meter, which is a great meter. It's going to provide both pH as well as temperature, and it will also include the ppm, the parts per million of your salts in your solution.
And then we get into the measuring implements. A lot of people, when they hear that they're going to be fertilizing their plants, don't realize that you don't typically, in a normal household, have something sitting around that has measurements marked out in gallons. You might think you do, but when you actually go to look for things, you realize that you've got your kitchen measuring spoons, but those don't go up into gallons, and it takes a long time to measure out gallons, even in terms of cups or quarts. So first thing we include is a 5-gallon measuring bucket that actually has graduated markings on the side. So it's easy to fill up at a sink or from a hose. You can tell how many gallons of water you've got there. Makes it easy to transport water to your grow, as well as, for example, if you're living in a colder area of the country in the wintertime, oftentimes the water will come out of the tap ridiculously cold in the middle of the winter. So it's convenient just to be able to fill up that 5-gallon bucket and let it sit for 12 to 24 hours to get up to room temperature before you actually use it to water your plants with. Then we include various different measuring devices such as syringes, which are very convenient for pulling up liquid nutrients and measuring out things down to 0.5 millimeter increments. We have them in a 10 milliliter size, which is very good for the smaller dosage of nutrients. We've got a 60 milliliter, which is good for things that you're feeding in higher dosages. We've got pipettes, which are ideal for things that you're really just doing 1 or 2 drops at a time, such as pH adjustment. When you're dealing with strong acids and bases, you really don't want to be dealing with your standard kitchen tablespoon and teaspoon measuring stuff there. These pipettes really are ideal for adjusting pH. And then for the big liquid nutrients, we've got a 250 milliliter graduated cylinder so that you can measure out 200 milliliters of your favorite fertilizer and mix it all together. Now, the watering can we include with the kit is actually something that most people don't think they really need either, because it seems like you should just be able to pour water out of a bucket onto your plants, right? Well, you give it a try and you'll discover not only does it splash everywhere, but when you're pouring too much water out of a bucket, you're going to displace the soil. You're going to end up with a crater in your pot. Your poor little seedling's going to get buried under soil. You've got water and dirt splashed everywhere in your tent, not to mention that lifting 5 gallons gallons of water to the back of your tent is very heavy. It just doesn't work out well. So we include a watering can that has a nicely designed spout on it. The spout makes it easy to deliver the water exactly where you want without having too much in the way of splashing. And then one of the critical things is this watering can actually fits inside the 5-gallon bucket we give you. So instead of having to try to pour water into the little watering can, all you have to do is hold the watering can by the spigot, dunk it in the bucket, and it fills up with a gallon of water at a time. Makes it much, much faster and more convenient to be able to water your plants. In addition, because you've got a 1-gallon watering bucket, it makes it really easy to judge how much and meter out how much water you're giving every plant so that you're giving each plant roughly equal amounts of water and fertilizer every time. To be able to mix all of the nutrients together, we also include a 24-inch mixing spoon because you may be tempted to go to your kitchen and just grab that same mixing spoon you use for your orange juice, but wood does not work very well as a mixing implement for fertilizer, and I'm not sure you'd want to reuse that wooden spoon for cooking after mixing fertilizer with it. And then metal spoons are actually a very bad option because a lot of the fertilizer mixes out there will have acids in them and bases in them that will actually attack the metal and not only destroy your spoon, but actually dissolve some of the spoon into your fertilizer mix, which isn't good for the plants. Also, a lot of spoons you get in your kitchen are not designed to mix stuff in 5-gallon buckets, so they're just not long enough. The 24-inch plastic mixing spoon we include is just perfect for mixing up nutrients in a 5-gallon bucket. It makes it easy to keep everything safe, clean, and you won't have your significant other yelling at you for using kitchen implements for mixing fertilizer.
All right, so we've covered a lot already. We've covered the tents, we've covered the lights, we've covered how we're going to control the garden and monitor it, and now Kevin's just covered all how we're going to feed it and maintain the plants. Now for some of the fun stuff, trimming, drying, and curing is the next section. It's pretty much every gardener's favorite part of the process when you get to take your plants down. So what we're looking for here are the materials and tools you need to take your plants from a finished state. You're at, let's say, week 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever, depending on your genetics, and they're ready to come down. You need to cut them down. You need to trim them up. You need to get them on a drying rack. And then you need to cure them for a few weeks in a sealed container. And so that's what we're addressing here. So in the So in the trimming, drying, and curing section, what we start out with is the scissors, because you need to get the plants down, you need to cut the buds off, and you need to trim up the plants. So we include both a straight and curved pair of scissors. Everyone kind of figures out what works for them. I like to pull the buds off with the straight scissors, but I personally like to trim with the curved scissors. That's just a personal preference.
And then these trimming shears are also useful earlier in the grow process for helping to top the plants, prune out side branches that you don't want, things like that as well. And it's important to note that these are not just normal scissors like you would find in any office desk. They are a little bit sharper than average, and they have a sharp point on them, which makes it a lot easier to get into very small areas in the plant and make exactly the cuts you want to.
And then once you've cut them down, whether you want to dry trimmed or untrimmed, you need a drying rack. And we do include the right drying rack. We have different sizes, but as Kevin explained with the ventilation, we include the right size for your tent. We're not going to give you a rack that doesn't fit inside the tent you're buying. So in this particular case with a 3x3 tent, you're going to get a 24-inch drying rack that'll fit in there no problem, have room around it for air circulation, and allow you to dry your flower at a nice, smooth, even rate so you get good quality finished product. Once it's dry and you've reached the point you're ready to where you are at the right, let's say, level of moisture, it's now time to cure it. And that's where we're going to get rid of the chlorophyll taste, get rid of that kind of hay or grassy taste, and hopefully bring out the flavors of the flower and really get it to where it's smokable and ready to be consumed. So for that, what you're looking for is something that's airtight. It's nice if it's light proof, because if it's not, you need to definitely keep it away from sunlight and things like that that will destroy the compounds that we want in the flower. So we've included is kind of the premier thing, which is the Sea Vault. It's a stainless steel curing container. And the one for this happens to be a 4-liter. Now you'll notice when you look at that, it does say a 0.5 pound capacity. And there are some notes there. And what we try to explain to you, this is the one thing other than the light in the tent that you really get to pick. We give you enough for the base light. If you're going to opt, as Kevin explained in this one, it starts with the 400. But if you get the 800, you're going to get a lot more yield. you would need more curing. The drying rack's still going to be okay, but you're going to need more space to cure in. So that is what we explained in the notes, that you would up the number of vaults you get, the C vaults you get for curing at the end, and that is editable on this page.
And then next on the categories of stuff we include are electrical and hardware. So a lot of the so-called grow kits you find online will come with a tent, a light, maybe an inline duct fan, and sometimes they'll throw in a pot or something
maybe
too.
Maybe a timer if you're lucky.
Yeah. But realistically, if you get that set up, you're going to discover very quickly that there's a whole bunch of things you need to go back to Home Depot for. One of the things that always amuses me is when you buy a new electronic device and it comes with a cute little cord, which is nowhere near long enough to actually plug it into any outlet in your house. So you always have to go out and get electronic extension cords. We include everything you need with your tent kit to be able to wire up everything we give you. And this is not just we threw something in there. We figured out exactly how many outlets you're going to need, how all of these things fit in together, and can you plug all of the various different timers and power adapters into the power strip. So we include a 6 outlet 15 amp power strip, which is going to be your main way of plugging in your whole tent kit into a wall outlet. It comes with a 12-foot cord, so you can put it within 12 feet of an outlet in your house and get everything to reach. However, as we all know, when you're dealing with these power strips and you've got things that have these big bulky wall wart adapters, that will often block other outlets on the power strip, and you can't use all 6 outlets on there, which is actually why we include other things, such as a cute little 1-foot long extension cord so that you can plug one of the timers in to the power strip without it blocking the other outlets on the power strip. Give you an 8-foot extension cord, which is used, I believe, for plugging in the HT2 temperature and humidity controller, so that can be inside your tent, but you can keep the rest of the power connections and the whole power strip outside your tent to make it easier to access things, as well as make everything a little bit safer. So we give you a couple of different extension cords, one for plugging in the oscillating fans. And again, depending on the size tent kit you get, we either include 1 or 2 oscillating fans to go inside. But those things, the cords are not quite long enough to really reliably reach out. So we give you an 8-foot polarized cord with multiple outlets on the end, so you can plug in 1 or 2 oscillating fans on there. And then we throw in an additional pair of our heavy-duty Black Dog LED ratcheting rope hangers, which are very useful for hanging the carbon filter and the fan attached to the carbon filter up in the top of your tent area to keep them out of the way of your grow and still maintaining that nice, clean air environment inside your growing tent.
And that brings us to the end of the grow kit. So even if you're not going to buy a grow kit, we hope that you can use this information to make better purchasing decisions and understanding what you need for your grow kit if you're going to set up your own and just go with one of our lights and not worry about the whole kit from us. But we do mean it to be both educational, to look at our kits and understand what you need and help save a lot of our customers headaches down the road. Or for those that are new growers and need all the gear, it's one easy click away from purchasing the entire thing. As you noticed, if you add all these up, we've got about 70 items total in there in the kit. So it's not some simple thing. As Kevin said, a lot of the companies out there sell quote unquote grow kits that have maybe a fan, a filter, a light, and a tent, and that's it. You will be making many trips to Home Depot, as you said, to get that really ready to grow, and you'll need to find a lot of other specialty items to get even close to what you'd get out of our complete kit. And that was our goal when we set it up, is to help save you the headache and time that we all had to go through when learning to grow indoors. So that pretty much covers it. Again, the main thing to recap you need to do is first decide what size tent you want based on your environment and where you're going to put it. To figure out what space you have, pick your tent, and then you pick your light based on your yield and what you're looking to obtain from it. And then you put this all together. Now, this is a fairly comprehensive podcast, but a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we also have an entire video covering the setup. So if you get the kit, you could listen to this podcast, but I'd really recommend checking out the video on our YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube and search for Black Dog LED. You'll find our channel, and we do have that. It's also on the footer of every single one of our kit pages, right at the bottom. If you scroll way below all the information, you will find the video there. So I recommend watching that. It's a huge help in setting up your kit. Again, there's so many parts and so much to learn.
Yeah, one other thing we've got as well is actually multiple videos showing complete grows in our kits using everything that we just described. So we can show actually how you use all of these different things, as well as how to take care of your plants, how to get started, all the way up through trimming, flipping everything into flower, harvesting your bud at the end, and curing, all up on the blackdogled.com/grow-along video journals that document entire grows.
Yeah, those are a great resource as well. We try to make our site, as deep as possible in terms of information. And if you don't find something that you really want on there, hit us up through the website. We have a contact form. You can call us also. We're in the office 9 to 5, Monday through Friday here in beautiful Colorado. So don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions that you don't find answered on the site. But we do try to make it as comprehensive and provide those tools, because all of us have been in those shoes where we've been learning to grow, whether it's a new plant or just learning to grow indoors. All of us do grow here at Black Dog LED, and it's a great hobby, and we hope you enjoy it as much as we do. So thanks again for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this installment of the Cultivation Cast. If you have any questions about the content or have an idea for a future topic, please do send an email to podcast@blackdogled. We're always open for suggestions. And thanks again for joining us, and happy gardening.